Hello everyone, my name is Priyanshu Singh and I completed this assignment. This assignment is basically this project designing or analyzing a network of host and service ports and vulnerability using a graph-based approach. We are using we have create a draw a relationship between them. I showing this is first we have connected a MongoDB, then first we have connected our MongoDB. Then we use some pipelines to interact with the queries queries and connect with the database, and this showing the ports regarding. This is a simple output of first. This is a nodes of graphs. There are some different ports of data to vulnerability. There this is showing of MongoDB. We have default value we have some default value of inserting some default value. Uh, like we had a host name is target one for example.com, and the protocol is TCP, and server is HTTP, and server is Apache, and vulnerabilities like this default vulnerabilities. We had added some default vulnerabilities, and this is random values, the random data, default data we have added, and this format we have shown. And now we provide a brief overview of brief overview of this technology and concepts such as Python for scripting, and we are using some Python for scripting, and network X for graphics representation, MongoDB is for storing a data, and class for entities like host, port, and server, and vulnerability. And we have added some different queries relationship between this data, and now we explain some code. First, we break down some code section for I explain them. First is graphic entity is .py. We have graphic entity .py is the first we add some host class to represent our network host with the host name. Like we have add some repo method first thing represent the printing, and we define the port class to represent the port we represent a port of number of protocols. We using some repo method for readable outputs, and we had some service class to represent a services of service running of host, including name and versions, and we add some vulnerability class to represent a vulnerability ties to server using a unique id and the descriptions. And second, we create a data integration of rag dot pipeline. This is a pipeline of py. This is a pipeline of a file. This is basically this is a graphical constant. We have add some graphical constant. Our network X graphical installed to represent a nodes, and nodes like host, port, and service vulnerability and edges to relationship between them. And second, we ingest data functions. We have added some data function ingest data function to ingest the functions. Ingest data function. We have this functions process the data fetching from the MongoDB, fetching from the MongoDB and creating a graph node of age based on the relationship like a host port, running servers and vulnerabilities, running servers and hash vulnerabilities. Second is MongoDB connection. We have some added another function of MongoDB connection. We are fetching our data from a MongoDB connection using PyMongo, and this data is passed on the insert data function populate the data graph, populate the graphs, and we have create an instance.py. It is an instance of pi is a first we have adding some query functions like a query port. To query port basically are queries that a graph to find the port associated with the given host name. And query vulnerabilities are find the vulnerability link to the server and running on a host. And second are running influencer. Basically this function is basically to display our nodes and edges in the graphs, and the run the queries for the test host, run the queries of a test host to show associate ports and associate ports and the vulnerabilities. And second main.py, and the main.py function basically are fetching a data of MongoDB and using fetch from the Mongos and execute the interface process to display a result according this data. Second, we have demonstrate the process. First, we are demonstrating a process like we are running the file python main.py to run this main file. And uh, second, the outputs of graph nodes edges the query result for the ports and the vulnerability of the test host. This is the output of a graph nodes and the vulnerability. This is a query result to port of vulnerability test host. We are using some test host target one example.com. Basically this we have to add it the test host. uh, and last we have we have add some uh, and now we recap the approach and explain the brief of using graphs to represent a complex relationship in a cyber security data to encoding our views and export the explore a GitHub repository for a code to further details and sharing a sharing the link of GitHub repository with the committed history. This is some points and causes we have added. Some points is basically efficient representing of relationship between the entities like a host, server, port, and vulnerability, and easy to query to inference for the connection or using network X and real world application in cyber security analyzing. Concepts basically this approach is based on many based on maybe not scale for very large data set without optimization. And the inference queries may be slow if the graph grow significantly. And this improvement the action improvement you could optimize the queries and more complex and visualize the graphs for a better instant. Thank you.